I probably would have loved those references if I knew the rest of the series.
Yeah, each one was an endorphin rush, like a little dopamine hit of like, oh, you information more. Yes.
Welcome to the More Magic Book Club podcast, a podcast for fantasy readers dying to talk about the latest fantasy book you read and loved. Each month, we discuss a recent fantasy novel in detail, so you know you're not the only one who hated that character or wanted to move into that fantasy world. And you also don't have to worry about exhausting your friends who just don't get it. I'm your host, Demi Utley, an author and avid fantasy reader who also runs the More Magic newsletter over on Substack.
And I'm your co-host, Marianne Bullis. I am a children's picture book author, corgi mother, and Brandon Sanderson fan, although we prefer to call ourselves Sandy Heads.
So excited to dive into our latest read with you and can't wait to hear what you thought. Since we're discussing the book in detail, there may be a few spoilers, so listen at your own risk. And now it's time for us to dive into this month's book. Today, we are discussing Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And thank you, Marianne, for hopping on and talking about this with me. I know you're a Sanderson fan.
Thank you, Demi. We prefer the term Sandy Heads.
We will have to talk more about that as we talk about Sanderson. So let's just start with a quick background of the book for anyone who hasn't read it. And yeah, I liked this book. I'll just say that from the very beginning. So it starts out with Tress living on this rock in the sea, which is not made of water. It's basically made of these spores that come from the moons that fall down and create the ocean. And they're emerald, hence the name. She loves this guy and he gets taken prisoner by this sorceress. And then she sets off on a mission to go and rescue him. And lots of things happens. She basically ends up as a pirate and they have to sail to different seas, getting progressively dangerous. I feel like I can't summarize this succinctly and touch on everything, so I think we're just going to have to talk about it. But that's the premise of the book. When you were reading it, I know it's been like a month or two since you read it, I think, but hopefully it's still fresh in your mind. Well, I'll just talk about the sea because that is in the title and it's very foundational to the entire book, is the sea and these spores, which are very dangerous. So in the Emerald Sea, if water touches them, they erupt into these vines and they'll just kill you essentially and destroy everything. So the salt, I believe, was one of the things that prevents them from doing that. And then also silver. So they drink salt water on the island where she lives. I'm curious, is this something that, like, are other Sanderson books set on this island, or is this like a completely new world?
That is a great question, Demi, and I'm going to try really hard to not turn this episode into a just hour-long praise of my dear Lord and Savior, Brandon Sanderson. So, and also I'm really excited for this to be our first episode because I'm really curious, for those who aren't listening, this is Demi's very first Cosmere novel, Brandon Sanderson novel. Whereas I wouldn't say I'm necessarily a PhD in the Cosmere, but I am a master's level. I could confidently call myself a master's level student of Brandon Sanderson. And so this book is actually one of many set in his own universe called the Cosmere universe. I think it's a good entry point into the Cosmere universe, but once you get into one book, this is essentially one book set on one planet. His magnum opus is the Stormlight Archive, which is going to be 10 books. There's 5 so far. Each book is about 1,500 pages, and that is set on the planet of Roshar. And this is set on a planet called Lumar. And the planet of Roshar is maybe a bit more advanced. This planet is a bit more, I don't want to say primitive, but they haven't quite understood the physics of their world yet. You know, this is going to be such a difficult task to explain the brilliant genius of Brandon Sanderson's physics. But I think this is also maybe, you know what, before we even start, I think this actually is a good time to introduce the concept of hard magic and soft magic to kind of like set a background for how Brandon's mind works. Demi, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so this is a concept that actually Brandon was the one who coined, is this idea of hard magic versus soft magic. So soft magic is the magic that we in the fantasy world are accustomed to. So think, for example, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. It's almost
Hmm.
like the powers that be made it so, and therefore it is so. There's not much rhyme or reason. It's like almost mystical, almost spiritual, this type of magic. And in fact, Lord of the Rings, the father of fantasy, is a religious book or like a allegorical spiritual book at its core. Even Harry Potter is pretty spiritual. And so there's like this mystical element to soft magic. The downside is there's not much rhyme or reason. So sometimes it's like things happen because it was meant to be. Think like the eagles or those giant birds that came to pick up Frodo at the end. But for some reason, they didn't take him to Mordor. Or think like Harry Potter, who just got resurrected just because. Like, just because it was meant to be, right? So sometimes there's not a rhyme or reason, but you get the like that like really nice longing of, mysticism and spirituality. So that's soft magic. Brandon, he is a connoisseur of hard magic, which is magic that is so logical. It's based on a logical set of premises. It is so logical, it's almost science. Like it's almost
Mm.
science. And so the Cosmere is this entire universe that has its own laws of physics that to us is magic, but the magic is based on such a logical set of premises that you could actually see,
How it works, basically. But
yeah, across planets.
it's interesting to hear you say that because as I was reading it, as a fantasy reader who definitely loves the mystical, like unexplained magic, when I was reading through it, I kept waiting. I was like, oh, there's a sorceress. Okay, then we'll see the magic. We're going to see magic. And then it kept being like, oh, this is how she's using the spores. And now she's a sprouter. And this is how it works. And I was like, okay, it's cool. I get that. It does feel obviously it's fantastical, but it's a different kind of magic than I'm used to, I would say. Or even because I was thinking, I know we had briefly talked about hard versus soft magic before this, and I was thinking of all of the different fantasy things that I've consumed over the years, and I kept going back to Charmed. I don't know if you watched
I
that.
loved Charmed, obsessed with it when I was a kid.
Okay, I had a feeling you might might have liked it. So my family loved Charmed, and in that because I was like, is it like a combination of the two? But I feel like it's still softer magic because they have the powers and they're defined in a way. You can move objects or you can levitate or you have premonitions, which are more defined, but they don't explain how it works. So it seems like that's the difference with Sanderson's magic world, where there's a reason for how all of this works. Whereas a lot of more traditional fantasy is you can have premonitions. So we're not going to go into how your brain works, I guess, is the difference.
Yes. And I would also, something just to add on to that is that once you understand the rules, you'll start to see common threads throughout the planets. So, for example, I don't want to spoil it, but you said silver is
Hmm.
something that suppresses the power. In this universe, there's a raw, pure power called investiture. And depending on that planet, it shows up in different ways. So on the
Mm.
planet of Roshar, his magnum opus, it shows up as stormlight, which is this giant storm that infuses people with power. In the planet of Lumar, it shows up in the spores in the different seas. So these spores are in pure investiture, pure power, and different rules show up. So silver across all planets has this suppressatory effect on investiture. Aluminum is also in the book too. It almost has like an inert property on investiture. And so you'll start to see sounds have different properties and light has different properties and metals have different properties, which is what his super famous series Mistborn is based off of the metals and the power of the different metals. So if you get as deep as I do in the subreddits, you'll actually start to see people come up with these hypotheses and
Hmm.
like theses based off of if this is the case and then this is the case, therefore this must be the case. And sometimes it actually comes to fruition. Like you can actually there's a bit almost of an enjoyable quality because you could actually predict what's going to happen in the story based off of these laws and the set of premises that he set.
That's interesting because I feel like I'm curious not to read more of his books and how I like them because I feel like for me as a fantasy reader, I like not knowing. I love when it's like, oh no, something bad's gonna happen. But there's a secret magical power you've never interacted with before, and it's gonna come in, and this is why it appears. And I feel like that unknown is what I really like as a reader. Since you're so far into the world of Sanderson, when you read other fantasy books where it's kind of unexplained, do you find that you're wanting that framework to know what's going to happen and when?
That is such a good question. Sometimes reading his books is really stressful because the powers are limited and you know that. I really like that overpowering aspect of other like more mystical fantasy
Hmm.
because it's like when all hope is lost, like the power will erupt from, something magical will happen and save the day and it's really nice. Whereas with Brandon Sanderson's books, you know that if they run out of stormlight, they're dead. So it's very stressful reading his books. And sometimes if the characters survive, it's out of like pure dumb luck. That being said, I do think that he is building towards a overall truly mystical source. That's my personal
Mm.
theory. Like the god that controls the Cosmere. I think he's supposed to be the real actual source of mysticism. It's just that we're working. I think Brandon Sanderson's point is that in the science there is mystery, and if you follow it it leads to mystery, like the source of it is
Mm.
something that's or mystical. Well, I should say mystical, not mysterious, but something mystical is the source. And I think actually all of the Cosmere novels are actually building their way towards finding the, not to use the cliche term, but the one true god who was destroyed eons ago.
Mm. That's interesting because there's an Einstein quote, something about if you study physics long enough, you can't help but believe in God, or I'm paraphrasing it, but it's almost like a summary of like, well, if you go deep enough into the science, then you get to the source. So, okay, well, now I kind of want to read the rest of his books again, uh, because that's interesting. Although, I mean, to be fair, if you're listening, you haven't read it, slight spoiler, so feel free to skip for a little bit. But at the end, they go to the island where the sorceress is, and then the sorceress is drawing runes with light. So I'm assuming is that the storm light? That did feel more fantastical to me, but I was like, maybe it's because I don't know the rest of the worlds.
To learn more, I recommend you read the next book, Elantris, by Brandon Sanderson, where you will learn more about this particular type of investiture.
Okay. Fine, I guess I'll read it. The narrator of this book is Hoyd. And in the book, we find that out, I don't know, 20% of the way in or something like that. And in the book, he is cursed and just cursed to have bad taste. And so he's doing all these really weird, funny things, which I, side note, want to talk about in a second. But as I was reading it, I was like, oh, I know enough about Sanderson. I'm assuming he's in other books.
Hoyd is almost like the Nexus being, in the Marvel universe, how Wanda Maximoff is in every single universe. Hoyd is like that, where he will show up in every single book. I don't
Oh.
want to say too much about him, but he is the most mysterious character, actually, is what
Mm.
I'll leave it there.
In my head, by the end, I was picturing him. In the beginning, I was like, I don't really like him. But then by the end, I was like, I feel like this is like Gandalf if Gandalf was cursed. That's how he was in my mind.
That's that's a good way to put it. I think that's true.
Okay, so that makes sense. I mean, he's not a wizard. Anyone listening, he's not a wizard, but they do compare him to being immortal. They allude to that many
Mhm.
times, and that he is like the only person the sorceress is scared of. So I feel like he's this godlike character, probably in the other books. So it made me want to read those, if only from that, which I thought was interesting. In the other Sanderson books, does he have a narrator like that, where it's a character narrating what's happening to other characters?
No, fun fact about this book. So Brandon Sanderson has a reputation for being the most prolific high fantasy author, whereas Patrick Rothfuss and George R. R.
Mm.
Martin are struggling to get their books out, like their final books out. Brandon Sanderson wrote this book on accident. So during COVID, actually, he wrote four full books on accident. He did
Oh
not
my
mean
gosh.
to. Right. And so he wrote this book actually for his wife as an experiment. He wanted to experiment with Hoyt's voice, and he wrote it as like a whimsical love story for his wife. And she was like, "Hey, this is good. You should publish it." But just to give you an idea of the kind of writer this man is that he writes full books for fun as like a love language for his wife. And so, yeah, that was actually that type of storytelling was unique to this story.
Okay, because I kept going back and forth on if I liked it. And I think I ended up liking it because he was such an important, he was the character that solved all of the issues at the end, him breaking his curse and coming through. Okay, I ended up liking it. If he didn't play such a pivotal role, I think I would have just found it annoying and distracting. But it slowly everything started tying together because I was like, why are we hearing from this guy? I want to be more in Tress's head. That's what I really wanted. And it was close to her, but it was still a little more removed than books that I tend to read. V.E. Schwab, for example, or Alex Harrow, like they're really in with the characters. And this one was someone else. And I was like, but I want to be with her. So who is this guy? I don't want to. So I think like, yeah, maybe if I was a Sanderson fan, I would have had a different perspective. But jumping in first, I was like, why can't I just hear from her? But then in the end, okay, this makes sense. I appreciate this. Now I get some more insight. As the narrator, there were some times where he would kind of have these philosophical little tangents for like a page or a few paragraphs or so, which I liked. But then I remember because I just finished the book and at the end it did this for everything was so tense. And then he started talking about, I don't even remember what it was, something. And there were a few paragraphs. And it was like, okay, I want to get through this. I want to know what happens, you know? So it was interesting. Yeah. What did you think? When you picked it up, were you expecting that voice?
Yes, and only because I was rabidly waiting for the release and learned everything I possibly could about the book before it was published. So I knew that I was really excited to see Hoyd's perspective for once, since, like I said, he usually
Okay.
shows up in every book in some form, but you never actually see his POV. So it
Mm.
was so interesting to see his POV as a immortal, mysterious being.
Yeah, that's interesting. Definitely felt, I was like, I feel like this is for the fans when I was reading it.
Yeah, that's why I was interested to see, because in my mind, Tress is a Cosmere coded novel. So there are some novels from Brandon Sanderson, like Elantris, for example, where you don't need to know about the rules of the Cosmere to
Hmm.
get it, to like it and wrap your entire mind around it. Whereas this book, it was many elements of the story you actually had to know about the Cosmere. So, for example, the big bad, slight spoiler, but she is not from this planet. So she's from another planet, which is why I say
Hmm.
read Elantris. So, um, and even Ulam, who's like the weird character who eats people, he's a major
Yeah.
character in Mistborn. So this is
Oh,
almost
really?
like his sequel of where did he go after the events of Mistborn era 2. So it's a very so that's why it was interesting. Demi, do you think that you were able to enjoy the book even without knowing, the context of the Cosmere, or do you think that you would you have preferred to have read the Cosmere first and then Tress?
Hmm. I enjoyed it without having read any of his other books. I think it was a good book. It moved very fast and it was very fun. There were moments where I was like, just because I think if I didn't know that he had so many books where people were so into his world, I wouldn't have been thinking about it. But because I know that and because I know you, like, I was kind of reading it. And if there's something I didn't know, I was like, I think this is referencing something that other people will get. It felt like there were a lot of breadcrumbs throughout the book referencing this thing. Like I don't have the story graph pulled up, but I kept adding comments of, I don't remember the specific ones now, but definitely Hoyd was one. And then uh I think the way that the magic was working, it was interesting because he had kept talking about the world and kind of how you said that the sorceress viewed them as almost like Neanderthals. Like he's not smart, like beings who don't know anything, you know? And and the way that it was raised was like, oh, this is a world that hasn't advanced yet and they're still figuring things out. So I was like, okay, yeah, I think that this is definitely helping other readers who know the larger universe, or solar system. I don't know what the planetary makeup looks like, but helping you guys to figure out where it fits within everything. So I think I enjoyed reading it as is. I probably would have loved those references if I knew the rest of the series.
Yeah, each one was an endorphin rush. Like a little dopamine hit of like oh, you information more. Yes, more.
Well, and it's like you're in the know, you know, because I did feel since I knew that there were gonna be, well, I didn't know that going in, but as I was reading it and I kept thinking there are those breadcrumbs, I was like, man, I'm not a part of this club. I don't know what these references are. But it didn't make me feel, it was still a welcoming book. It didn't feel like, oh, this isn't for you. So anyone listening, if you haven't read his other books, it was still a very fun read. It was very fast. It moved quickly. I did think it was interesting because I listened to him on an interview with V.E. Schwab, and they briefly mentioned Tress, and he kind of said that it came out at the beginning of the cozy fantasy, before cozy fantasy became popular, and he was kind of comparing it to cozy fantasy. And I don't know if you've read anything that's labeled as that, but it felt more cozy to me than traditional fantasy, but it still wasn't as low stakes, just like rom-com-y feeling as some other cozy fantasy. I read The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. I don't know if you've read that one, but
Love
it
the
was
title, but never read it.
it was good, but it was definitely like I don't really know how to compare it, but this one was much more, I would say this was more intense. It did talk about people being ripped apart by vines, for example.
Not very cozy.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting that because he was saying that this kind of, he didn't say it was cozy fantasy, but was implying that it was part of it, like could have been like a precursor to all of that. And I was like, interesting. I feel like, is this lower stakes, less intense than his other books?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't necessarily call it cozy for the same reason that you don't. The stakes are high. So
Hmm.
I would almost characterize it as whimsical fantasy. It was very whimsical. There was a lot of whimsy and almost like a callback to old fantasy, medieval fantasy, the talking rat,
Oh, yeah.
which makes you think of folklore, like European folklore.
It did feel
And
like a fairy tale kind of.
fairy tale, yeah. And he
Yeah.
did say that his inspiration for this was The Princess Bride, which I got. As the young people say, it was giving Princess Bride. So I felt that. Did you?
That's interesting. I didn't know that until right in this moment. Yeah, I guess I could see it because it was very like The Princess Bride. God, it's been forever since I read that or watched the movie, but I feel like it had this kind of comical, well, definitely this comedic element to it. But then they would sword fight. So this was like that. It was kind of jokey, but then people did die and it was kind of intense. I could see that. In the beginning, Tress was like obsessed with cups. That was her thing where she like collected different cups. And I at first was like, this is interesting. I appreciate how she take notes of each different type of cup people are drinking and describes it a little bit. And then at the end, she basically goes in a boat by herself to go to the sorceress's island. And then the sorceress, she only takes two cups with her, and one of them gets broken. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that made me so sad. And it broke and then it just moved on. And I was like, wait, can we just linger there for a second and talk about this cup breaking? I feel like I wanted her to feel more devastated in the moment, which she was focused on, living. But yeah, I just thought that it was cute. I would say that reminded me of fairy tales where something like that happens, but then it just keeps moving on and it doesn't linger. I feel like a lot of modern books really like will slow down and dive into like the emotion behind something like that. Whereas like a fairy tale is more, oh,
Yeah.
and she was cursed and then she like laid down for forever until like
Yeah.
Prince comes.
They
Yeah.
shaved off bits of their feet and then it didn't work. And they were like, oh man, not ow. Oh, get me to a hospital.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh no, I'm trapped in a tower. I'll just stay
Oh,
here.
yeah.
So yeah, I feel like that's part of where the fairy tale element came out for me. When you were reading it, because so again, spoiler, the guy that she loves turns out to be the rat who can speak. And I had a feeling, I think like right as they got to the towers, like, oh, he's like, this is Charlie, like this is like who it is.
The same places when I had the final same realization.
Yeah. Because up until then I was like, oh, it was good and I really liked I was enjoying it, but that was when it got my heart, you know?
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, and then when she realized, I thought she wasn't going to be able to find him, but he was still there, so it was fine. And then they escape and everything's great. But Yeah, I feel like that was the moment because I was like, oh, they were together this whole adventure. Because, like, from the very beginning, she was like on that ship with her and she didn't know. And like, he couldn't tell her. And oh, it just like was so sweet. And I could see how it was like a love story, like you said, for his wife. But yeah, that was like the part that really got me. That and then when Fort's like speaking board, the evil captain stomped it and it broke and then he was devastated. That was the other thing that got me too. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really tragic because she destroyed his way to communicate.
Yeah, and he had to get it in a special way. I don't remember the details of it now, but it was a magical gift that he had, and so it was super rare. And then
Yes.
she just stomped on it, and
Rude.
yeah, I know. That what did you think about the part where they went down to the dragon and basically so Tress and then Captain Crow, who is the evil captain, go down to the dragon, and the captain says, I brought someone here to be the slave, so you can grant me the wish. And then Tress is like, wait a second, I could do that. So then she says, I have brought someone and claims as the captain. And then they have this little debate with the dragon listening as to who should stay down there. And then Tress ultimately is victorious and she leaves. And I thought it was interesting because I was expecting that to be, I mean, obviously they still had to go to the sorceress, but I was expecting that to be more of a battle scene. And then it became Wit's scene, who can be more clever, basically. Um, yeah, what were you expecting when you were reading that and how did it land for you?
I loved it. That subversion happens quite often. To be honest, in his books, is you
Hmm.
don't the what happens isn't what you necessarily think is going to happen, but when you look back, you think, oh, that makes sense. It was very fairy tale-y back again, like back to that fairy tale quality, and I really
Mm.
enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that transaction because something that I think he's really good at is he gives characters parameters of how smart they are and how witty they are. And oftentimes, I know it's a literary device, I can't remember what it's called, where people just seem to be, let's say they're dumb the whole time, and then all of a sudden they're super smart, and it just drives the plot forward, but it makes no sense for their character. The
Hmm.
exchange that they had, if you look in the story, the seeds were being planted for that argument that she was making against Captain Crow.
Hmm.
So it was actually a very nice payoff for me as the reader to be able to follow along those crumbs and say, oh, this is how she was able to get to this argument. And it makes sense for an imperfect character who's sheltered, who's brave, yes, but sheltered, going against this very, street smart, brutal person and
Hmm.
win. It makes sense. She couldn't have done it by herself. She needed Hoyd's help. Hoyd was really the one who planted the seeds of the argument. But the character, we could tell from everything he had given us, was smart enough to plant those seeds and make them grow, or plant
Hmm.
those spores.
I was
Or
gonna say
we're
just
gonna use
water.
yeah, yeah, make them sprout.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good point. I also liked because in that scene they go down and the narrator explains that in most dragon tales, most of the dragon lore across different cultures is that they are greedy and that they hoard wealth. And he sets it up as she's walking down there that the dragons don't hoard wealth, they hoard ideas. And I thought that that was interesting too, because then it's not like a dragon that we see in a lot of our tales where the dragon wants the treasure and that's what's motivating it. It was the dragon wanted like the cleverness in a way and was interested in intellect. So I thought that that also was a nice subversion, like you said. It's a different thing than you expect to go and battle this dragon, which I mean, there are some stories where they riddles and things like that. Um, but I thought that was really interesting. And I liked that. So his dragon in this book had silver, I think, or some sort of metal on its body, and then said that when they die, that you would find bones with like jewels, basically, like with this like precious metal. And so that was like the theory for why people assume that dragons are greedy and just want wealth, which I thought was an interesting way to tie it all together. I really appreciated that and took note of it. I didn't love the whole idea of the dragon having these slaves working the rest of their life under the sea, but he did say that they're taken care of and like they get to read whatever they want and research, but then
But
never like her she
he's
had a
the owner. He's the owner. I don't listen to what the owner of slaves say. So that he
That's true.
might actually, but like, a lot of owners of living creatures have said, "Oh, they're happy." And then when you ask the living creature, they're like, "Not really. Actually, I'm not happy." So he might be. I don't know what Brandon Sanderson has in mind for the dragons. He's been teasing us with them here and there, but
Mm,
Brandon Sanderson, I will say this, is someone who really understands human nature on a just unbelievable level, like a spiritual level, a genius level. And so I have a feeling that this dragon might be an unreliable, either they're not actually slaves if the dragon is good and he just calls them that to and they're free, or he's an unreliable narrator and maybe there's more to the story than we're seeing.
hmm. Yeah, it would be interesting because yeah, Crow ends up staying down there, and the idea is that the dragon is the only one who has the knowledge of how to cure her ailment, which is basically she's being eaten alive by the spores from the inside. And yeah, I feel like there were several moments in the book where I could see wanting a spin off of this part. Oh, what does it look like living with the dragon? Or even a short story of like what happens to Crow? Does she change? Does she grow and like, stop being this kind of evil, brutal person? What does the world with the dragon look like? But then also each like we have an epilogue that shows some of the conclusion for some of the characters. So we see I think Soleil is her name. I don't know if that's how you pronounce
Hmm.
it. Her dad joins the ship, which is who she was searching for. And then we have another one of the main characters. Anne gets glasses so she can actually shoot cannons, which is all she wanted to do, which I thought was so cute. And then yeah, for his culture, which I thought was interesting, they were hunters, and then because it was like, well, we can't just keep hunting things, we're going to kill everything. So then it became about who gets the best deal, or that was what he had decided was his hunt, which I thought was really cool. So he got to go and negotiate with the monsters of the sorceress and achieved his character arc and purpose that way. But I feel like for each of them, I was like, oh, I kind of want a little side story for each of them, or like, what happens with Tress now? Her and Charlie are on the sea, which I feel like is a sign of a good book when I'm like, okay, but can I just know a little bit more? Don't end now.
Something that I really appreciate is that he usually does deliver. So even some of the books where he's like, okay, I finished it and there's no more, then the next year he's like, actually, I'm going to release three more. So it's not even he has other universes. I've read everything Brandon Sanderson has ever put to paper. So he has this other universe called the Cytonic universe, and that's what happened. I was like, oh, these are a good four books. I wish I knew more, but he gave us a good ending. And recently, in his State of the Sanderson, which is his yearly newsletter, he announced that he's going to be releasing more, and I was like, sweet. Like I don't have to leave. I feel like he likes his world as much as we do, and he doesn't want to leave it either. So he'll just keep giving us. And honestly, Demi, like my purpose in life is to live long enough, and for Brandon Sanderson to live long enough so that I could read everything. Like I want the universe to be complete in my lifetime. Amen.
That's so funny because I don't know if you listened to that interview of him with Victoria Schwab on her podcast, but he said that he was like, my biggest fear is not finishing what I promised before I die. So he's like, I'm gonna just focus on that and finish those, and then I'll just write whatever and not commit to these larger things. The 10-book series. I was like, I could see that because thinking of like different, yeah, like the people you mentioned before, like Patrick Rothfuss, I read The Name of the Wind so long ago. And then the following book, which I can't remember the name of now, no, that's the King Killer Chronicles is the series.
Yeah. I actually I am also on the Patrick Rothfuss subreddit as well. Back when I used to have hope that the third book would be published. Fun fact, if you look him up on Google, his title is former author. So ever
Oh my
since
God.
then, so I've lost hope. I've had to make do with just making up my own fan fiction in my head as to how the story ends, since I don't think I don't think we're gonna get that one. I think we have to make do with what we have.
I did not know that you read those. I feel like we've never talked about that.
I like them. I like them. We'll save
Yeah.
that for another podcast, maybe.
Yeah. Well, just to touch on that really briefly, because the thing I always remember from that series is they express emotions with their hands. Or I think that
Oh,
was
they
like the
talk
thing.
with their hands like the Adem people, the like assassin
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. And I thought that was so, it was like really interesting how he dove into that. Like, I feel like Roth was, he's really into the cultural aspect of things, which I would say felt true for Sanderson as well. He was definitely talking about the different cultures. And even though in the book there's really one main culture in Tress, Hoyd, the narrator, was hinting at different types of cultures, which made me curious what the rest of the books look like. Although if they're 1,500 pages each, how would I have time to read those? I would never read anything else.
Yeah, so that's why you see that's pretty much all of my free time. I am trying to reread all of the Cosmere in time for book 5, which just came out, and I've been rereading since January. So just and all of my free time goes to rereading the Cosmere, and I'm on finally book 4, almost done with book 4, so I'm almost there.
Oh, yeah, well, hopefully, I hope it's a really good one once you get to it, book
I'm
5.
excited. Pray that that I don't come across any spoilers because it has been a landmine over on, the Sanderson subreddit. So pray for me.
Yeah, I feel like you just need to stay off the internet. Like, just
Yep.
read the book. If someone like me had just started with Tress, so you said the Elantris, I think?
Elantris is a great starting point.
Yeah, so that'd be the one you'd recommend next.
Definitely. And then after that, Warbreaker, which also the technology that Fort has is actually from the planet that Warbreaker is set on,
Mm,
Nalthis. So and those 3 books together are 3 standalone books that don't have sequels. So they're just a good place to
okay.
enter. Then you get into the Mistborn series, which is probably his second largest series in the Cosmere universe. And then last but not least is the Stormlight Archive, which is his, like I said, his magnum opus.
Okay, and those are all in the same, because you said there was another one in a different.
Oh, he has several universes, Demi.
Oh, okay.
I think Brandon Sanderson is a genius, a genius. Um, like no other. But like I said, I'm gonna not turn this into an hour-long praise of him. But hey, Brandon, if you hear us, can we get tickets to the Dragonsteel convention? Okay, thanks.
We're just gonna put that out there. I don't even know what it is. I'll just show up and you can,
We'll cosplay. I already have our cosplay in mind. Don't worry. So we're good.
as long as can I have magic? I don't know. As long as I get magical powers, I'm in. Uh,
Deal.
yeah, so that's good to know. So maybe I'll check out Elantris if I have time outside of all the other books I'm reading. So for Tress, I'm curious, was she, especially as it relates to other Brandon Sanderson's other books, because I feel like she started out as this very passive, almost meek character who she didn't want to impose on anyone. She didn't want to really ask for what she needed. She just kind of would do what people wanted to not create any sort of friction. And then throughout the book, she gets away from that. And I thought she had a really good character arc. Like she definitely grew and we saw her grow and saw it kind of her changed and it made sense why. I'm curious for the characters in the rest of his books. I know he's good with character arcs. Um, but do you see that a lot where it kind of makes me think of like Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, like this like character from the middle of nowhere who doesn't know anything and then they're like thrust into this space. Um, is that common in his books or do they tend to be like Hoyd like these like immortal, like all-powerful beings?
So, okay, that's a great question. When I say this man is a genius, it's because of his ability to hold a sheer amount of human personalities and souls and logic to their minds. And it's so diverse and so varied. That being said, he does now, as you're talking, I'm reflecting, he does have really good arcs for a lot of his characters, like Vin, who is his teenage female character in Mistborn. She
Hmm.
basically starts out as a feral street urchin who's focused on survival, and her whole street arc is about becoming like a human, learning what love is and sacrifices and not being a street urchin. It's a kid who was born without, learning what it's like to finally have and what
Hmm.
that means. So he has these really good story arcs. But
Hmm.
also his characters are just so varied and their motivations when he gives it to them, it just makes sense. I've never seen a character of his do something that doesn't make sense. So he does have like god characters, and something that I think is really creative is that some of his gods have gone crazy from just sheer immortality, has driven them nuts. And
Hmm.
so even what they do makes sense. Their insanity. Each god has its own brand of insanity, and it just makes sense. Like, what do you do when you are immortal? What does that look like if you are a human who was made immortal? What does that turn you into? And it's a really interesting creative exercise. And I feel like he comes through. It shows. It's really good. So his characters are very varied. I'll tell you, some people have said, again, as a follower of the Sanderson cult, I don't agree, but some people have said that his female characters fall into, common literary traps. Like Vin, they say that, I can't remember what it's called, but it's when you just make a boy character a girl, but it acts like a
Hmm.
boy. I
Hmm.
didn't necessarily think so. I thought she acted like a street urchin. I thought she was a really good character of a girl who tried really hard to not be a girl, because being a girl in this underworld is really dangerous. It's 10 times more dangerous than being a boy. So
Hmm.
I feel like she came off that way. But even Brandon Sanderson has admitted that maybe he could have made her more feminine.
Hmm.
So he kind of he kind of agreed with the critique. But if I was a street urchin, I would do my best to act like a boy, pretend I'm a boy, do everything I can to not suffer in that way.
That's interesting because I feel like then we're getting into like like gender, what is gender and what does it mean to be a boy and a girl? Because yeah, I'm curious what the criticisms are of I haven't read the book, so I don't know the character, but why can't why can't girls be boys, just girls? Like
Yeah. So
yeah,
what? She has short hair.
that was a criticism.
That was one of the criticisms, was just the fact that she's so boyish. But I'm like, hey, she's barely going through puberty. She's a little girl, and like I said, she's a street urchin. Actually, people also criticize Tress as well, the character of Tress. They said
Hmm.
that she was I think they called her a pick me, or the kind of character where, oh, the I'm not like other girls. Like other
Mm,
girls are like this, but I'm a cup collector. But I just thought that it was just, this girl is weird. Like, she not in the sense that
yeah.
she's not like other girls. It's in the sense that she just has this idiosyncrasy that other people have. Like, other people have idiosyncrasies, and hers is that she's like into cups and she's really practical. It's just like, I feel like he did a pretty good job of making her a unique character. What do you think?
I think so too. That is so interesting. This is hard for me. I do not get on Reddit, the other things to hear people's like insights. So I don't really have that to color my perspective a lot. And it kind of makes me grateful because I'm like, I just read it as she was just a person. And I feel like people are trying to, it's almost like no one, people just want something to be mad about. Like, oh, we want to put her in this box and say that he did it this way, or like, she's not feminine enough, she's not masculine enough, she's not whatever. But because I read it and I was like, yeah, she likes cups. Like, I like dogs, It's like if she had dogs and like dogs, then it would be, oh, it's the classic girl, like Cinderella with her creatures, or something like that. But because in the book, it's not like she wasn't, it's hard for me to think of her as not like the other girls when the ship was full of women. And a
Oh yeah.
lot, a lot of the five or so other main characters, most of them were women. It was Anne, Captain Crow, Soleil, and then Laggart was male, Hoyd, and then I guess there were like six, so it was three men and three women. So plus Tress. I don't know. Yeah, that's really interesting to me. I did not get that at all.
I think people are just jealous, Demi. They just, that's just my opinion. They're like, damn, I wish I could write that well. Well, you know what? He's not that good because if I were to write the story, I would
Exactly.
have. But good luck trying to write a brilliant, like, Cosmere, universe-wide story. That's not for everyone.
Yeah, well, and even if this was a standalone and he didn't have like all of these other characters, this massive universe, multiple universes, um, the characters were really good. And I read it as not that she wasn't feminine enough, like she was just a person. I liked it because it wasn't, yeah, I read it as she was just a resourceful person, and her gender didn't really matter in this book. And when I started reading it, I actually had a comment where when she was on the first ship, she was with these other sailors and they were kind of creepy. I didn't like it. I think I had even added a comment of like, "Oh no, I don't trust these guys. I'm worried he's gonna go to like rape or something," and I really did not want
He
that.
Something I appreciate about Brandon is he'll never go there. He not to again praise this man, but he understands, in my humble opinion, he understands what women think when they enter into a situation. And oftentimes, his female characters, something will happen, and I'll be like, in my mind, I'll think something. And then on the page, she is thinking exactly what it is I'm thinking.
Hmm.
That's why, again, I think this man is a straight up genius, like brilliant genius, is that he can in his brain, he captures all of humanity in his brain. Like what it's we need to dissect this man. I feel like again, just about when I look at his writing, I think Brandon doesn't like to go there. He
Hmm.
knows it's a reality for women, and so he'll write about it. But usually something happened. For example, in the case of Tress, the ship getting exploded and everyone dying. So that it doesn't have to go there. Like so that like he'll usually find his female characters a way out, either through luck or through their wits or something, so that it doesn't go there. And as a female reader, I really appreciate that. Like I don't want like I read fantasy not because I like gritty fantasy, like for example, George R. R. Martin is not something that I'm here for. I don't like that.
Hmm. Yeah.
I want to learn like fantasy is really special because it's about humanity, but it's in a way where it's like one step removed so that I could learn about humanity without having to stare it too much in the face. And so I feel like he t- hits on that so well. It's like he talks about what it means to be human, but not in a way that's too hard to bear. There's always this layer of radical hope, even in the face of evil, systemic evil, God, like spiritual evil, like demons and whatever, like or in his case, evil gods. Like there's always going to be evil in the world, but he has this layer of radical hope that always overcomes everything. And it's just, in this planet, like on planet Earth, in our fantasy world, that is just what I need.
Yeah, I love that because I think, well, when you're saying that, I feel like that's how I'm thinking as a writer. Like the reason I want to write fantasy is because I'll have something where I feel powerless, and I'm like, how can I write where I overcome this? Where there's like some magical tool that like overcomes this, or I can explore that. And so I like what you said about fantasy as a way to reflect on being human without being too close to it. It allows it in a way, it gives all of us a feeling of like, oh, we can control and the themes of hope. And so like the good versus evil, I know people don't like that trope of all good versus all evil and they're battling, but I personally love that. And that's why I'm reading fantasy. And I don't think it has to always be black and white. I think that the bad guys can still be human and have reasons why they're doing things versus just being, I don't know, like Sauron, just evil. But yeah, I appreciated that because when she was on the ship, I got a little nervous. I was like, I don't think it's going to go there because I had heard the interview where he kind of said it was cozy. So I doubt there's rape in this, but then there was murder. Um, but it was because just thinking about the gender thing, like he did, if she was just a boy in a girl's body, I wouldn't have had that feeling. The reason I had that feeling is because I don't have the page, but I know one of the sailors kind of implied something, and that's when I got uncomfortable. So he did address her as a female character in
Yeah,
that
this man
sense.
knows. This man knows.
Because yeah, I think I don't know, I liked it. I and in a way, it's almost insulting as a woman to think that some people are saying that like she can't. be resourceful and practical and solve all the things as a spratter because she's a woman, you know?
Yeah, I myself am not very practical, but my mom would have scene for scene done what Tess did. So, there are practical, pragmatic, clever, brave women out there.
Oh my God, you are all those things. You are, I'll turn this into a Marianne praise podcast. uh,
Tune in every week to hear about a woman you don't know.
but yeah, I liked it. I thought it was good, and I liked that. I appreciate it because so we had that scene where I was like, oh, I don't like these sailors. I don't want Tress to be here. And then, like you said, the ship got blown up, and then she wasn't there. And then she joined this other ship where they're pirates, and there were a lot of women on the boat, and it felt like this safe space. And it also felt like when she joined that ship, and I saw that the captain was female and that there were all these other women. That was a hint to me, like, oh, this isn't our culture, which is interesting. I subconsciously was like, okay, women and men are equal in this world.
Yeah.
And
They
yeah.
might suffer in other ways. So you might suffer in other ways on this boat, like, getting kicked in the stomach.
Yeah.
Like what happens to Tress later on, but not in other ways. So it's like you said, it's easier to take as a reader, especially as a
Yeah.
female reader.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to know that he's safe for female readers because I think not every male fantasy author does that, which I mean, Brandon Sanderson's male. And there are plenty of women fantasy authors who also have like rape scenes and things like that. But there have just been a few times where I picked up a book and I'm like, you were so mean to the women in this book, and I just can't keep reading this.
I was like, I have made a horrible mistake. I have exposed myself to something I should not have exposed myself to. Dear Lord, get me out of here. This is why I'm also a big fan of DNFs, do not finish.
Oh, yeah.
Because I learned that with a book that shall not be named, that you and I, Demi, both know that we are not fans of, but we will not say it in public. But it's a very famous series.
I'm like, which one is it? But that's okay. We'll put it on the internet.
But like I'm glad, like I was in the middle of like one particularly horrible scene, and that was the first time I closed the book and I was like, why did I do this to myself? I got nothing out of this other than pain and suffering. Like, why did I do that? And ever since then I've been very like liberal with my DNFs.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point because I feel like I'm becoming more aware, partly because I'm thinking about how I'm experiencing things when I'm reading it. And so I feel like there's a difference where the tension is I'm uncomfortable and I'm disgusted and I almost like a fear, this fight or flight feeling. And you want to keep reading because you want to get past that part, or maybe you're like, I don't even know if I want to keep reading this. But then with like something like Tress, and there are plenty of really good fantasy books. Again, I love V.E. Schwab. We'll definitely have to do her new book at some point. And I would say hers, even though she has violence in her book, I'm never really uncomfortable the way that some other books would do. It's like I want to know what happens to these characters, and the discomfort is there as part of their growth versus to shock and awe the reader. So I feel like those are like the two big differences to me.
If I'm in a state of dread and I'm like, oh, I have to continue reading, and like, oh no, what's gonna happen next? Oh dear God, no. Like, what, I'm too old. Okay. When I was a kid, I would do that, and I got through, and there were some books that were good. That The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, was I too young to read that? Yes, definitely. I guess now I'm older and the world has enough dread. Why should I now, in my time off, go through it some more? Like you said, I want to learn about what it means to be human in a really fundamental way without having the dread. Like the discomfort, yes, because that's part of the journey, but I personally don't think you necessarily need that dread and that like awfulness involved as well.
I agree. Yeah, I think so. I think like even I hesitate to reference Harry Potter because I don't like what's happening with J.K. Rowling and everything right now. But thinking about those books when I was growing up reading them, it was very much like bad things happen, but it wasn't something where I would be scarred for life after reading it. And you wanted to keep reading it, or even like the Inheritance Cycle, the Aragon books, if you've read those.
I love those. Yeah, those are good.
I was thinking of those when you were talking about the immortals and the dragons who become in the hearts there and they like live forever. But anyway, we won't digress into that series. But those books also do good. There are some more gruesome scenes in those books, but I would say it doesn't linger there, and it moves past it pretty quickly, and you're really motivated to find out what happens versus like, yeah, that like, I just like, I don't know. I'm over books where it's like, okay, let's add in a rape scene or like, let's kill off all of your favorite characters.
Yeah,
And
in one brutal scene that's
yeah.
talked about forever and ever. This is how I like measure it is there that layer of hope and humanity throughout the book? If not, then maybe I shouldn't read it. I always say that if you were to blindfold me and drop me into the planet and the world in which Game of Thrones is based on, I would wake up and run into a tree again and again and again until I took myself out of that planet, because there's like no good people, like there's no goodness, It's like 95% just awful, evil, horribleness and 5% goodness. And I don't think that's really faithful to reality. Like I just don't. Like I know there's evil in the world. I don't want to say I'm not naive, but I just like, if the planet is more evil than my planet Earth, I don't want to be in it. Like, yeah, that's how I measure it.
I agree. I don't think it's reality that everyone is bad. And I do like books though, where if it started out and it seemed like everyone was bad, and then you actually find out, oh no, they all have heart and they grow. And that's kind of like part of their growth. I like those books.
Yeah, because that's an important life lesson, is like the multi-layeredness of people.
Yeah, and you're not inherently bad, and you can't, you don't have to stay that way.
Yeah.
Well, I know we could talk forever, and so we'll definitely have more. Any final thoughts on Tress or Sanderson?
That is a good question. If you haven't read Brandon Sanderson, I highly recommend it. Maybe don't start with Tress. I think that's my takeaway. Is I was surprised, Demi, that you started with Tress, because it just is so Cosmere heavy and so Cosmere lore heavy. I do recommend that every human being alive should read Brandon Sanderson, because it's like, this man, he tells the truth, like with the capital T. Like if people read his books, I think if everyone read his books, maybe the world would be a better place. But I would start, for those of you who have not read Brandon Sanderson, I would actually start with the Mistborn series first, or Elantris, but probably Mistborn.
I think I have had a hold on that book, the first Mistborn book, for God, I think I first placed a hold like 10 years ago, and then it like never came to be, or it like canceled out because there's so many holds on it. And I've done it like off and on for years and never get. So I guess I'll just have to buy the book.
It's time. It is time.
At the library. But I will say the reason I wanted to read Tress, this sounds so bad, but it's because of the cover. I saw it and I was like, because the Mistborn and like some of his other book covers look a lot older and like 90s-ish. And I was like, oh, but this one looks modern, and it just like, it's very shallow, and I know you're not supposed to do that, but that's
who doesn't? Who doesn't? That is a beautiful cover.
It's me. It is beautiful, and I think that it's been classified as fairy tales. I've seen it on like fairy tale lists a lot, so that also made me want to read it, because I love a good fairy tale fantasy story.
How about you, Demi?
Yeah, I was gonna say I liked the book. I would actually recommend starting with it, unless you're like, oh, I want to know all of the nuggets. Then if you want those, then obviously read the other books first. But it was fun, and it was short. And so I think that was probably a good entry point if the other books are 1,500 pages. So I liked it. I am glad that I read it. I'm glad to be a part of the Sanderson Club now, even if it's small.
I'll see you at the Dragonsteel convention in our cosplay.
Yeah, when we get the tickets. Okay, well, I think that's all. This was so fun. Thank you so much for talking to me. And everyone listening, feel free, wherever you're listening, if you can comment and you have thoughts, please do. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the book. And we will have another episode soon. Thank you, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we're actively working to record the next one. If you'd like more inspiration in the meantime, follow More Magic and the Little Ways on Substack, which we've linked to in the show notes below. Have a book you want us to discuss? Head over to moremagicpodcast.com and tell us what book we should read next. Until next time, happy reading, and we wish you more magic.